Stoicism is a school of Hellenistic philosophy founded in the 3rd century BC. The object of this philosophy is how to practically live your life given the transient nature of the world. When I was younger, I knew little about Stoicism and dismissed it as merely fatalistic. I have come to understand that Stoicism does not only focus on the fact that everyone will eventually face calamity and death, but in how to respond to these things. Reflexive impulse is the default reaction to adverse events we encounter in our lives. This, according to the Stoics, is the source of our discontent. If we can anticipate negative events beforehand and approach the event from a distance using logical reasoning, we will find a variety of options for dealing with it that are available to us. The Stoic Seneca advised more than just thinking about a reaction to adversity. We should actively practice it. Quote, "It is in times of security that the spirit should be preparing for difficult times. While fortune is bestowing favors on it, is the time for it to be strengthened against her rebuffs." End quote. The website The Daily Stoic comments on this, saying, quote, "Comfort is the worst kind of slavery, because you're always afraid that something or someone will take it away. But if you cannot just anticipate but practice misfortune, then chance loses its ability to disrupt your life." End quote. The Stoics viewed the past as done and the future as not relevant. The present moment and what you do in the present moment are all that matters. This moment-to-moment view was tempered by an anticipation of the future as described before. This is an important feature of the philosophy, for without the anticipation, living moment to moment denies any option but to react reflexively as events unfold. You are simply a passive element, buffeted by the currents of the world, without volition. The Oxford English Dictionary defines truth as the quality or state of being true. The definition is then clarified as, quote, "that which is true or in accordance with fact or reality," end quote. A definition that I like is that which conforms to reason and evidence. There has always been a war over ownership of the truth. People in general prefer to stand in alignment with the truth, and are willing to make sacrifices for what they perceive as virtuous. Our would-be managers are aware of this, and spend enormous resources in order to define truth and virtue for us. Happily, these methods can be recognized once you learn how to analyze the arguments you encounter. There is a strategy in chess called the Queen's Gambit. Not countered, it will win the game in a few moves. Beginning players often will not see it until it is too late, but recognized early enough, it is easy to counter. There are many of these beginning moves in argumentation called logical fallacies. They are used in argumentation and the public sphere in general because very few people are exposed to logic and critical thinking. We are never taught how to use these tools. We will hear vague references to logic, but no actual examples of how it works, like the difference between having the answer and showing your work. There are lists of logical fallacies all over the internet, and they vary a bit from one to another, so take a broad survey if you wish to study them, and think critically about all of them, including the partial list I present here. The fallacy. A logical fallacy used in defense of some position does not automatically mean that the position is false, but it does mean that it stands on shaky ground. If someone is only using logical fallacies to argue their point, the odds are high that there is an attempt at deception or the speaker is unfamiliar with the use of logic. As you become conversant with the different fallacies, avoid using them and look for better arguments to support your position. This will train you to be a clearer thinker and better able to defend yourself against bad arguments. Additionally, you may have a vague feeling that some argument is flawed but can't say why. If you learn how to create syllogisms from the positions you encounter, you will be able to isolate why it is unsound. Ad hominem. This means to the man. It is by far the most commonly used fallacy. The mechanism for this fallacy is to attack the person and not the argument. Pointing out some shortcoming in a person does not invalidate their argument. For example, I can't believe Bob said X about Y. He lives with his mother. Argument from authority. This fallacy asserts that a proposition is true because the authority of the proposer. The clearest example for me was Richard Nixon claiming that when the president does something, it is, by definition, not illegal. Argument from ignorance. That which has not been proven false must be true. This fallacy often presents itself as a lie of omission, relying on the listener's ignorance. In early debates over the toxic effects of lead in the environment, proponents of lead use successfully established the narrative that there were no studies showing the adverse health effects of lead. The testimony in the congressional investigation on the health effects of lead were even rescheduled without telling witnesses in opposition to lead in an attempt to suppress this information. The excluded middle. This focuses on two extreme possibilities without considering any middle ground. Quote, "You are either with us or with the terrorists." End quote. Bandwagon. Something is true because it is popular. I suppose everyone that I ever knew had to sit through a lecture from their parents about why they shouldn't jump off a bridge just because all their friends were doing it. It amazes me that in spite of all that, people still fall for this one. I suppose there is a kind of inertia to public opinion. Non-sequitur. The conclusion does not follow the premises. An example of this is the claim that not supporting a war is the same as not supporting the troops. When Ron Paul ran for president, one of his campaign positions was to end foreign wars and bring the troops home. He received more donations from individual members of the military than all the other candidates combined. I view this as direct evidence that the troops felt supported by Congressman Paul's position and responded with support of their own. Correlation versus causation. Wrongly attributing one event to another. Your team wins a game when you had forgotten to wash your team jersey. So, you never wash it again and wear that dirty jersey every game day going forward. Selection bias. Only accepting data that supports your position and ignoring or holding the source of contradictory information suspect. In fact, our vulnerability to logical fallacies is dependent on our selection bias. The casinos of the world operate on a business model that depends on selection bias. They depend on people's tendency to ignore losses and focus on winning. When you are wedded to any conclusion, your sense of identity will grow attached to that conclusion. Instead, align yourself with the process of determining the truth that reason and evidence provides. This provides both the comfort of consistency and the opportunity for growth, critical to the living.